Now imagine this scene. You grab your keys, put on your shoes, open the door, and your dog watches you in silence. He doesn't speak, doesn't ask, doesn't stop you, but something changes in his eyes. The door closes. The sound of your footsteps disappears, and at that exact moment, an invisible process begins inside his mind that almost no one notices. What your dog thinks when you leave home isn't just loneliness. It's a deep, silent, and emotional psychological experience that can define his entire behavior, even hours after your absence. When you walk through the door, for you it's just another ordinary day. For your dog, however, it's the beginning of a highly significant mental event. Unlike humans, dogs don't understand the concept of time as we do. They don't think, my owner returns at 6 p.m. What happens in his mind is much more primitive and emotional. He feels the rupture of the bond at that exact moment, as if his safe world had just moved away. And this activates emotional areas linked to attachment, security, and survival. In the first minutes after your departure, the dog's brain enters a state of emotional alertness. He listens to every sound in the environment, tries to identify patterns, and interprets any noise as possible evidence of your return. This explains why many dogs run to the door when they hear footsteps in the hallway, or the sound of a distant key. It's not random. It's conditioned emotional expectation. Now comes an impressive psychological detail. The dog doesn't understand that you left voluntarily. For him, separation can be interpreted as temporary abandonment, and this feeling isn't rational, it's instinctive. In nature, separation from the group means vulnerability. That's why, even in safe environments, the canine mind reacts to the owner's absence as an event of high emotional importance. As time passes, the second mental phase occurs. Emotional adaptation to silence. Some dogs lie down near the door. Others walk around the house. Others sleep more than normal. This behavior isn't laziness. It's a psychological mechanism of self-regulation. The brain reduces activity to conserve emotional energy while the primary bond is absent. But there's a huge difference between an emotionally balanced dog and a dog with separation anxiety. In the first case, the mind gradually accepts absence as part routine. In the second, the brain enters a cycle of continuous stress. The heart races, cortisol levels increase, and the home environment stops being perceived as completely safe. It's in this state that behaviors like destruction of objects, excessive barking, and restlessness emerge. Many owners believe the dog destroys things out of anger or revenge. Psychologically, this doesn't make sense. What happens is an attempt to deal with emotional discomfort. Chewing objects with the owner's scent, for example, is an unconscious strategy of emotional reconnection. The scent activates effective memories and temporarily reduces the feeling of separation. There's also a fascinating phenomenon called associative emotional memory. Your dog doesn't just remember you as a physical image. He associates your presence with the sound of your voice, the smell, the routine, the schedules, the movements around the house. When all of this disappears at once, his brain perceives a pattern break, and pattern breaks generate psychological insecurity in social animals. Another crucial point is environmental perception. When you're home, even without directly interacting, your presence emotionally regulates the environment. Your dog feels protected just by the fact that you exist there. When you leave, the psychological environment changes completely, even though physically everything remains the same. The couch is the same, the house is the same, but the feeling of security isn't. Some dogs stare at the door for long periods, not because of conscious hope, but because of emotional bond. The door becomes the mental symbol of the primary bond's return. It's as if his mind silently says, that's where security comes back from. Now think about something even deeper. When you return home and your dog shows extreme happiness, jumping, running, and wagging his tail intensely, that isn't just simple joy. It's emotional relief. For hours, his brain has been in a state of waiting. Your return represents the complete restoration of psychological balance. And here's a surprising detail of canine psychology. For many dogs, A few minutes can feel emotionally much longer than hours, depending on the level of attachment. This explains why some dogs react with extreme intensity even after short absences. The determining factor isn't chronological time, but the intensity of the emotional bond. There's also the issue of human body language before departure. When you grab your keys, put on your shoes, or change your routine, your dog notices these micro-signals. His brain learns patterns quickly. If these signals always precede your departure, they become psychological triggers of separation anticipation. In other words, emotional stress can begin even before you walk out the door. Another fascinating aspect is the dog's mental silence during absence. Unlike humans, he doesn't create complex narratives. His experience is sensory and emotional. He feels the environment, hears sounds, smells the air, and processes everything in real time. This makes the owner's absence a complete sensory experience, not just emotional. Now imagine the impact of this on dogs who already have a history of abandonment or frequent environmental changes. Their minds become even more sensitive to separation. Each departure of the owner can be unconsciously associated with past experiences of loss. This intensifies attachment and increases emotional dependence. There's also an important psychological difference between dogs who have stimuli during absence and those who remain in complete environmental silence. Silent environments can amplify the feeling of loneliness, while light stimuli, like familiar sounds, can reduce the perception of emotional isolation. Interestingly, many dogs spend much of the time sleeping when the owner is away. This doesn't mean indifference. On the contrary, sleep is a form of emotional regulation and passive waiting. It's as if his mind enters emotional economy mode until the primary bond returns. Another point few people notice is that the owner's emotional state before leaving directly influences the dog's mind. If you leave rushed, anxious, or tense, your dog absorbs this emotional energy. Dogs are extremely sensitive to body language and human emotional tone. For them, your behavior before departure is powerful psychological information. Now think about something even deeper. For the dog, you're not just a human. You're the emotional center of his universe. His routine revolves around your presence, your voice, your smell, and daily interactions. This means your absence isn't just physical. It's a structural alteration in his emotional reality. There's also a phenomenon called secure attachment. Dogs who deeply trust in the owner's return tend to handle separation better. They still feel the absence, but don't enter an intense state of stress. This is built through consistent routine, predictability, and balanced emotional interactions. On the other hand, when routine is unpredictable, the dog's mind remains in a constant state of uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the greatest generators of anxiety in animal psychology. Not knowing when the owner returns creates a continuous cycle of emotional vigilance. Another impressive psychological detail is that the dog's sense of smell plays a huge role in the feeling of presence. Objects with the owner's scent function as emotional anchors. That's why many dogs prefer to lie on clothes or places where the owner usually stays. It's not random. It's sensory reconnection with the affective bond. As hours pass, the dog's brain enters a more stable phase of emotional waiting. He may play alone, observe the environment, or rest, but always keeping part of his attention focused on signs of return. This is instinctive and deeply connected to the social behavior of dogs. And then comes the moment of return. Even before you open the door, many dogs already perceive your presence through the sound of footsteps, smell, or familiar vibration. At that instant, a positive emotional explosion occurs. The brain releases dopamine, serotonin, and other substances linked to pleasure and relief. That's why their reaction is so intense and genuine. But here's the deepest revelation of all. Your dog doesn't forget you while you're away. He just learns to deal with absence within his emotional capacity. The canine mind is much more sensitive to bonding than we imagine. Each departure, each return, and each routine silently shapes his psychology. In the end, the psychological truth is simple and powerful. When you leave home, your dog doesn't just wait physically. He processes emotionally, feels the absence, regulates anxiety, interprets the environment, and above all, keeps alive the bond he has with you. For him, your return isn't just the end of an absence, it's a reunion with the emotional center of his world.